What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Dynasty Dummies, your home for the latest and greatest in college football news and action. We're your hosts, Hunter and Tony. We're going to jump right into the storylines this week so we can save as much time for our rankings as possible. We first want to start out with a shout out to Oklahoma wide receiver Contez Lewis, hoping that he's all right. He had a really scary scene in Oklahoma's game against Kent State where he collided with a brick wall in OU's end zone. Every report that I've read shows that x-rays came back negative. He was up walking around during his evaluations. So really positive signs for him. Just a really scary situation, but looks to be heading in the right direction and hoping that he can get back to 100%.
It's always scary seeing that sort of thing when, a player gets hit by something, whether it's a brick wall or an actual person, and then they don't get up. So, it's glad to see that he's okay. And I've said this before in our group chat. I said it when Oklahoma was hosting Michigan that I did not like how close some of those the walls were. And it blows my mind that you have a brick wall behind an end zone where players come crashing down all the time. So hopefully that's something they can get figured out quicker.
Just not enough space between the end zone and where that wall lies. It's actually pretty crazy. I remember last week with the UVA field storming where people were saying how come they don't have some kind of wall or specifically a brick wall that is a blockade between students and the field, since UVA's hill just is free entry onto the field. And this is why. There's a lot of dangers that can come with that. The brick wall, certainly it looks cool, but player safety-wise, it led to a really scary scene. I'm glad that the reports are saying he's okay and hoping, like we both said, that he can come back to 100%.
You never want to see it, but hopefully everything turns out okay and they can, bring up the conversation of, can we get like padding or something?
Yeah, how can they make that safer?
Yeah, because that all it takes is one, thing like that to happen for, change to happen, and hopefully they do it sooner rather than later. But another thing that's looking for some change, UNC, is Bill Belichick cooked? I mean, he gets absolutely embarrassed by Clemson. I mean, they opened up the play with the game with this trick play, 75 yards to the house, and from there it just went all downhill for them. It's just not looking great in Chapel Hill right now. Like, it just seems like the environment as a whole is just not looking good. He doesn't look like he's vibing well there either or something. So it just doesn't look good down there right now.
The reports coming out of Chapel Hill have not been great, to say the least. It started a couple weeks ago when it came out that he wasn't allowing Patriot scouts on campus to interview, to scout his players, which, to me, that is such a huge red flag. And there's no doubt that Bill Belichick's one of the greatest football coaches of all time. But by not allowing Patriot scouts to come to UNC, he's letting his ego get in the way of opportunities for his players. It is so absurd to me that he will not allow his players an opportunity to talk with a team that may be interested in drafting them at the next level. I think he's letting his ego get in the way of potentially being successful at UNC. I don't want to write him off completely. Like I said, he is without a doubt one of the best to ever do it. Obviously, college is a lot different than the NFL, and he's had a lot of roster overhaul. But there's clear distractions taking place right now, and it's not been a pretty start to this tenure.
It's never easy to transition. I mean, we've seen it multiple times, whether it's college, coaches going up and then some of them coming down. But it's just something that takes time. It's not going to, especially with how the portal is nowadays, NIL and everything, it was always going to be different for him. So I'm with you. I'm not going to completely write him off just yet. I'd give him a couple of years or so to really see how it pans out, and then you can make your decision from there. And another thing with it is the Hulu series that we were supposed to be getting, basically almost like a Hard Knocks per se, is no longer happening. I can probably see why, but at the same time, it's kind of, indicative of where they're sitting right now as a program, to where you sign on for it, it's supposed to be out there, and it's just you're pulling the plug on it because just maybe they don't want people to see things or how things are going behind the scenes and whatnot, or it's just not good for television and the program.
You really can't call it a documentary if you're only going to release it if it's good, if I'm being honest. You want to call it a documentary, then you release it no matter what. Obviously, I understand not releasing it. I can only imagine what's going on behind the scenes. Obviously, on top of everything else we discussed, there's also was reports that Belichick put a social media ban on UNC football accounts from posting or interacting with Patriots-related content as well. The floodgates seemed to open after the Sunday night NFL game where Drake May led the Patriots to upsetting the Bills, and they did post some Drake May things, but it's just a culmination of what is happening behind the scenes. Clearly, I don't know who pulled the plug. I would imagine Hulu wanted this to air no matter what because it would have done numbers, so I'm assuming it was from the UNC and Belichick side. Best part is, though, is that this footage that they had recorded has to exist somewhere. They had recorded some, so they can either have the courage to post what they already had or that they can hide it forever until it somehow leaks in probably 5 years. But either way, if it ever gets released, I will certainly be watching.
We'll have to just wait and see, and I think it'll be, like you said, it's going to be an interesting one if it somehow finds the light of day, and I don't know. It's just going to be one of those things that we can look back at, maybe 5-10 years from now and just be like, what the hell was going on here? So I don't know.
It'll be fun to look back on this. Hey, and who knows, maybe in 5 years we're talking about how crazy it is that this was the start of the tenure, and now look at him winning a national championship. Who knows? The way things are going right now, very interested to see how it plays out long term, though.
It'll be very interesting to see. And another thing that I think is going to be a little less interesting to see is something that recently came out today, in fact, where Texas Tech is now changing their logo. I will try to put the graphic up on the screen and the video of what it is and what it's going to be. I hate this. It looks so bad. You're taking away the Texas Tech logo where it's got the two T's stacked on it. It's got the black shadowing underneath it with the
almost
different
beveled
shades of red. Yeah, so it shows depth and whatnot. And then this new one, they've modernized it where it's just two blank T's, red T's on top of each other, the big and the small one with a white outline. And it's just flat and boring. And they released a bunch of different logos with it, but that being their main logo, it's like, who signed off on this? Who's doing? It's like UAB doing it, where they changed their logo to just UAB and got rid of that awesome dragon. I don't understand.
They brought the dragon back.
Yeah, I'm so glad for it, but it's just like, who is making these? Why we don't need to modernize college football like they have in the NFL.
I'm not really sure why. I would need to look up when the last time they did a logo update is, if I'm being honest. I'm not sure when they last did something like this. To me, this is kind of a nothing burger in the sense that it doesn't change anything, but it is an interesting choice. I wouldn't say I hate the logo. I just like their old one a lot more, and maybe in a couple years I'll change my mind, but it almost feels like they went back to a logo from the 70s where it's just so simplistic. We'll see how it turns out. I'm sure the gear will still sell just as fine as it has before, but I'm definitely with you. I think the old logo that they'll use for the remainder of this season, just it looks a lot sharper, maybe is the word. It pops more. It pops.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely looks better on the side of a helmet, in my opinion, or on a jersey, or on the sleeve of a jersey, and on merch or something like. It's just stuff like that. I don't know. It's just one of those things that, at this, like you said, at this time, it doesn't really make a lot of sense of why or and what's the point behind it and stuff like that. But then it could just turn into 2-3 years from now where it's just like, whatever, who cares, It's all about the results on the field, sort of thing. So, I don't know. They've spent a lot of money recently, and I guess what's a few million more to change all your logo and branding?
They can just go drill a new oil field and it'll be all right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm not too worried about their pockets. The gear will sell itself, obviously, if Texas Tech keeps winning. Another topic that is courtesy of Dynasty Dummy member Cody is the topic of field storming and when is it okay to storm the field? What constitutes it being worthy? Does it have to be a top 10? Can it be a huge win versus a rival? Tony, I'm going to toss it over to you. I want to hear your thoughts first.
This is one of those things where I think me and you were somewhat in agreement of like, we brought up in this where this week we saw two of them where it was Cincinnati versus Iowa State doing it, and then UCLA versus Penn State. The Cincinnati-Iowa State one, albeit in our books, is an upset. Was an upset. You had an unranked versus a ranked, and the unranked won. So why wouldn't you storm the field? I mean, it was a pretty packed out game from what I saw, and there's nothing wrong with doing that. But then you have the sense of UCLA Penn State where there was maybe 20 people storming the field. Like, it just didn't look good. And in my opinion, what constitutes a worthy field storming is the fans. I mean, you look at your example one now is going to be the UVA one. I mean, that was just super electric. It was fun to watch, albeit with the little safety concerns. But it was one of those things where it was just like, wow, like that was pretty fun to watch, sort of thing. Where it's just like the moment that whistle was blown and it was blown dead, they were immediately on the field. And then you look at the UCLA Penn State, and it's like game's over, and you see 5 people running onto the field, and then like a couple other people are like turning their heads like, should we do this? And like, oh, they slowly make their way on. Like, it's got to be one of those things where it's almost like a collective effort of like, all right, we're doing this regardless. No matter how this game ends. I mean, obviously if they win, you're not going to do it if they lose, but if we blow this team out somehow, yeah, we'll do it. If we squeak by, we'll still do it, sort of thing. I don't know, it's just sometimes it seems like when they're on a whim, they're not as electric and good per se, but it's just one of those things where it really just depends. Like you said, it's top 10 only. Sure, maybe if it's an upset. I mean, my biggest thing is upsets. I love to see them in upsets. That is what makes them more fun.
I agree. I think we did fall on the same page when it came to the Cincinnati-Iowa State one. According to Vegas, it might not have been an upset, but it certainly was in every kind of rankings metric. I think it was warranted. This was the highest-rated team that had walked into Cincinnati in 9 years. So the fact that they ended up upsetting them according to the rankings gave them warrant to storm the field. I think it does not have to be a top 10 only. I think it's all to do with the energy of the fans. Like you said, it comes down to the fans. You're all in or you're all out. Cincy fans clearly were in. I don't even think you need to necessarily be a ranked team to storm the court, to storm the field. It can just come in a huge win. I think back to, as a JMU fan, several years ago when UVA basketball came to JMU and played our men's team at JMU for the first time, maybe ever. And we beat UVA, and those were 2 unranked teams, but we stormed the court, and I think that was so warranted. It's an in-state rival, a game that you don't get to play that often. I think it's a case-by-case basis. I think both of these were warranted. UCLA's might have been the worst one ever. It's as deserving as it was. When you don't have any fans there, it doesn't look good when you just have a handful of people running onto the field. It lessens the blow. There's that video of the security guard trying to stop the little girl and her dad. It was crazy. UCLA, they deserve to storm the field. It was a shame they did not have the crowd to back it up.
Absolutely. It's, even with as bad as UCLA was, like, you'll see these bad teams and they welcome in a high-ranked opponent or just a highly touted opponent per se, and they still find a way to, put it, fill seats and stuff. And I understand that, I'm sure fans of UCLA were probably on the boat of like, we're done with this team. We don't want to give them any more money until we see some results. And maybe this is the thing that flips it for them. I mean, the way that they were celebrating afterwards made it look like they just won the national championship. And good on them, because their season was an absolute dumpster fire before that game. So I don't know. It's just one of those things that it's going to change week by week on what we think and what not. And, it comes down to the game itself, like you said. So I don't know if there is a right or wrong with it realistically. I think there's more.
It's a case by case. It's a vibe.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a massive vibe thing. So I don't know. I'm not opposed to it. Just make it look fun.
I agree. I'm never going to stop someone from storming the field as long as you're having a good time and you make it look great. I'm not going to stop these UCLA fans, the few that did it either. They hadn't won a game, then you beat, formerly number 12 ranked Penn State, which just leads us perfectly into our obvious upset of the week, where UCLA shocked Penn State 42-37, led the entire way after not leading a single minute this whole season. May have come as a shock to many, but someone as myself, I was a little ahead of a curve. I had already dropped Penn State from my rankings. Did I foresee this? No, I have to admit I didn't. But, man, was that an electric upset to watch. It is probably the most embarrassing loss in the James Franklin era, and people are starting to ask, how hot does his seat get from not being able to win the big games to not even being able to win the games that they should.
It's funny because it's turning into James Franklin lost this game to cover up the fact that he can't win the big games. He's like, oh, you guys think I can't win a big game? I'm going to go ahead and lose a small one for you too. So I don't know. I think his seat is definitely hotter than some may think, because Penn State was regarded as a potential 1 seed for the playoff and
they're
potential
preseason
national
number
champion.
2.
Yeah, I mean, the preseason number 2 going to unranked, and we're not even halfway through the season. It's absurd on every sort of scale for them, especially with how good they were last year as well, and the amount of people that they brought back. And so you would think they would be able to take that step up, but right now it just seems like they took 5 steps back. So, like you had said, it looked like they were just out-coached, out-hearted, out-efforted, everything. It just seemed like they were just there to be there because they had to play a game. And it looked like UCLA kind of like started off hot, and then they were just kind of like, whoa, like they're not playing good, or we got their number right now. So they just ran with it, and they sure as hell did run with it, because they did not look back the entire time. So good on UCLA for this, but it brings into question for Penn State. How can they bounce back from this, and what does their season look like after this?
It's a great question. Penn State, obviously, the season is not over. However, a loss like this really sets them back. It is hard. When you lose to an 0-4 team, it's not just a loss like no other. It decimates your viability. They're sitting at 3-2 now. They play Northwestern this weekend, then Iowa, and then they have to travel to Ohio State. They have to win out, in my opinion. Even they have to be at least 10-2 to make the playoff with the loss to UCLA. Now, will the College Football Committee believe that? That's to be seen. But I don't think I think they're in a spot where winning out is the best thing they can do. Obviously, everyone wants to win out. But if they can beat Iowa, Ohio State, Indiana, and Nebraska, who are all still left on their schedule, and should get the job done against Northwestern, Michigan State, and Rutgers, they should be in a good spot. I think the wins will speak for themselves, and they'll have a shot at the Big Ten title game. Obviously, a lot of games left to be played to see how that conference championship plays out. But I just don't trust this team to win these big games against Iowa, Ohio State, Indiana, or Nebraska even at this point. They did not show up last week, and it was embarrassing for this kind of program.
Embarrassing isn't even the right word for it, honestly. Like, if there's something worse than embarrassing, that's what it was. I mean, to go there and do that, and then I think it was on Sunday, James Franklin tweeted game week and acting like nothing's happening.
That took
and just
courage. That was brave, man.
Yeah,
brave.
and he's got some balls on him for doing it. I'll give him that much. But what are we thinking here, man? Like, the last thing you should be doing, coming off of a loss like that is putting out a tweet, talking about the upcoming game. Like, no, you should probably be focused on working towards that upcoming game, because you have a massive bounce back game that you desperately need more than probably just about anybody right now if you want any sort of chance at anything at the rest of the season. So, like you said, if they win out like every other team wants to, they'll put themselves in a good position. But again, James Franklin, those big games, doesn't mesh well. I think they lose to Ohio State. I think they lose to Indiana. And I could even see them losing to Nebraska, honestly, at this point. So it's going to really depend on how they do against these lower tier teams. I mean, obviously UCLA was the lowest tier at this point, but it's now a matter of fact of what can they do after, because they need a reset right now. And if they can't get it, if they can't turn around quickly, then their season's 100% over.
I could not agree more. It is going to take a full effort from bottom to top, from the equipment guys to the custodians to the VPs and everyone to keep the ship right, because another loss is really going to stifle them. But moving on to what we thought was the game of the week, and we just can't stop talking about UVA, it seems, as much as it pains me, but 16 UVA traveled to 21 Louisville and won 30-27 in overtime. This was just an awesome game from start to finish. Louisville's defense really slowed down UVA's offensive attack. UVA came in averaging just under 540 yards per game, and Louisville held them to 237. It was a really awesome game. It really did come down to the wire. Louisville came storming back in the fourth quarter, 10 unanswered, to put it into overtime 24-24. Obviously, UVA pulled it out in the end. I think turnovers were the difference maker in this one, though.
For sure. I mean, I've said it multiple times on here, and I'll keep saying it. Turnover battles is what can decide these games. And this one, I feel like it very much decided it. It was, like you said, start to finish, that game was so fun. It was very entertaining, and it just goes to show how deep the ACC is now with, some of these teams. And, I think both of these teams could absolutely be there towards the end of the season, and we're in the conversation of, who's in the running for the conference title game, and these two would probably have to be mentioned. It's going to be, I think Louisville's got more of an uphill battle now. UVA is going to be coasting a tiny bit. They could always slip up, but, they're two, I guess those you could probably say were their two opponents that were more or less in their way between them and FSU. So them beating both of those goes to show it's like, okay, they could be in the running for this, and, they could end up meeting Miami more than likely in the conference title game. So, it's definitely looking more likely for UVA, but Louisville is definitely still in the hunt for this, and definitely going to have to keep an eye out for them.
I agree. It is. These were two really good teams. I think they're both going to be down at the end of the season in the hunt for the ACC. Something to remember, too, UVA's only loss to NC State does not count as a conference loss. It was agreed upon when they both canceled games with smaller schools. So that, even though they lost to NC State, they're 3-0 in the ACC, which is a crazy turn of events. But shout out to UVA. Great win. They get into the center of the Venn diagram of non-offensive touchdowns, as they had a pick six and a fumble recovery for a touchdown, which were the difference makers in this game. So really great performance by both teams. I think both teams are going to be in it towards the end of the season. UVA stock is rising, as much as that pains me. But taking a look at some of these other top games that happened this week. Number 1, Miami beat 18 Florida State 28-22. Florida knocked off Texas 29-21 in a game that, Texas did not look great. And then Alabama handled number 10 Vanderbilt 30-14 in a really strong win.
Yeah, all of those games were very good. Florida knocking off Texas in the swamp, always fun seeing that. Finally gets Texas kind of off their high horse. But Texas Tech handing number 25 Houston its first loss of the season, 35-11. While we had mentioned earlier, Cincinnati shocking Iowa State 38 30. And then, of course, Washington stormed back versus our number 24, Maryland, to beat them 24-20. And then to go into our teams, of course, because it's our podcast, our rules. Tulane had the bye week this week to get back into shape and whatnot, and they'll be playing this Thursday against ECU. And then your JMU Dukes, kind of lackluster performance, but they get the dub nonetheless, and they win against Georgia State 14-7. Talk me through it.
We survived that game is how I would put it. I'll start off with the positive. Our defense is legit. It is an extremely good defense. I think that they can compete with anyone in the FBS level. They're that good. They play that well. The offense is where we're struggling, and it's really been a trend under Bob Chesney of not performing well on the road in Sunbelt games. In his 5 road games in the Sunbelt Conference, they have not performed well. They have not covered the spread or just straight up lost. This past weekend was maybe the worst offensive performance I'd ever seen. So we got really lucky to escape Georgia State with the win. We have to figure out this passing attack. Alonzo Barnett did not look great, but I don't know if it's him. It comes down to play calling. I think the biggest issue is that on offense, it just feels like we lack a true identity. Obviously, we're a run-first team that wants to whittle you down, have these long, sustained drives, as that helps our defense, who is our real breadwinner. But in games that matter, you have to be able to throw the ball, and we just haven't been able to consistently. It is frustrating, to say the least. We get a chance at home against Louisiana this week, so hoping we can right the ship there, but it's a struggle to watch at times. So the defense is going to keep carrying us. I think JMU, that showdown with ODU in 2 weeks, is still going to be a huge one. Looking forward to that one. But without further ado, let's jump into our rankings for this week, following week 6. As always, just remind everyone that when we're doing our rankings, head-to-head is a key factor. The results of these games matter. We're not going to consider hypotheticals. And overall team vibe is just something that was a little bit debated in the group chat this week, but I think we just kind of established that it's kind of a bucket for what we feel about teams, how they're playing, what they look like, their technicality, all of that. But keep in mind, every one of us values a little bit of these rules a little bit differently than everyone else, but these are what we stick to. So without further ado, Tony, let's show them our personal rankings.
Yeah, so like you had said, our criteria always going to hit on that, and a big point of emphasis, like you had said, where in our collective group we each kind of value our own sort of things, and we all have our own opinions. Agree to disagree, or we all agree on something, we all disagree on something. It's bound to happen. It's hard to get everybody to agree on the same thing. But just to start off here, I'll quickly kind of just go off of mine here. I moved Miami back to the top. I think them and Oregon, honestly, could flip-flop for the next couple weeks, because obviously Oregon has a massive game upcoming.
For sure.
But Miami getting another ranked win was enough for me. I had mentioned earlier in our preview that they could very much take it if they handled business, and they absolutely did. So again, on the road as well, so that's a little more valuable there. I think that they've done enough to take that top spot back. But then, Oregon could easily, if they go and handle business this weekend, they could absolutely take it back. But for now, Miami's going to take it, and I think deservedly so. And I think most of us in the group agreed with that. I think they were unanimous, I want to say.
They were unanimous this week after the votes were split between the two last week.
Yeah, so it just goes to show, nothing against Oregon, them having the bye. So it's like, can't really do much about that. Can't really, you can always go down in the bye. It's really hard to go up in the bye sort of situation. So something against them, you could probably put them as a 1A, 1B sort of thing for me right now. But
I agree.
For now, they're taking the top. I had quite a few teams just missing out on the cut here. But I did have 5 new ones, with UNLV finally getting in, Navy finally getting in, Michigan coming back, Cincy jumping in, and then I went ahead and was the first one to throw ODU in at 25. I had a lot of debate about my 25 and who I wanted. And there was a bunch of teams I could have done, to name a few that I had that just missed. Obviously, of course, my Green Wave, but like I just said, it's hard to go up when you're unranked into the rank when you have a bye. I'm really just not going to do that. LSU's right there. Again, they could easily find their way back in if they can string together some wins. I have Arizona State as well. That's right outside, along with Washington getting a big win against Maryland. And then Illinois is still very much teetering in there. I have, of course, Texas, Penn State, Florida State, Houston, and Maryland drop out purely because, they finally, Texas and Penn State, get out of here. I'm done with them. They could somehow go win the Natty, and I don't think I would rank them. I am being at this point, they have done nothing but prove everybody wrong in the wrong sense of your preseason 1 and 2 are now unranked. That's just absurd. It's just insane. It just goes to show that preseason means absolutely nothing. These preseason polls are absurd. They don't mean anything. People just kind of spew whatever they feel like, going based off of a piece of paper that has a roster and whatnot, basically, because there's really no preseason. There's nothing to get a gauge on any of these teams, so it just goes to show that preseason basically means nothing. I do want to give a quick shout out to Memphis for being the first bowl eligible team. They are the first team to get to that 6-win mark. Yep, they are 6-0 and deservedly so for me. I had them jump up to 16. They were pretty close to getting into my top 15 over Tennessee. But, for me, the movement within outside of my top 5 is just because everybody that was possibly above them lost. So a bunch of teams in the middle of the pack there just jump up. We were talking about it earlier, and I know this was one of your questions of what does Texas Tech need to do to get into my top 5. And I had mentioned it when we were discussing Ole Miss, Texas A&M, and Texas Tech for me are extremely close-knit. They are very much interchangeable for me. They could easily be – any one of those three could be anywhere between 5, 6, 7 for me right now. This was just kind of like a I'm going to throw it down sort of thing. I already had Ole Miss at 5. I don't think, again – bye week, I believe. It's hard to do that. Texas Tech was definitely the closest team to jumping up there because of their win. And I can tell you, it probably won't be long before they jump up a little bit. And it's purely just because of Ole Miss and Texas A&M, and they're going to have a pretty rough schedule coming up. So it'll be interesting to see if they can, survive and advance sort of thing. But, we've said it multiple times. Our rankings change drastically every week. I had Bama jump up 7 spots. Exactly. I mean, Bama jumping up 7 spots when at one point in the season I had completely written them off. I was done with them. Now they're up in my top 10. Vandy, of course, dropping 12, and then Iowa State being my biggest drop at 18, and they were almost unranked, but I decided to keep them in. I think they've done enough before that game. It was just had to give Cincinnati their well-deserved ranking as well.
That kind of leads me to a question for you. Since he beats your 6th-ranked team but only jumps up to 23rd, walk me through that process. How come they didn't see a bigger jump? I know they only jumped up to 20 for me, but curious to see why they only moved up to 23rd for you after knocking off a top 6 team for you.
No, it was definitely a lot of thought in there because I was almost trying to find a way to put Cincinnati in there because I knew, you go in there, you beat a ranked team like an Iowa State, who I did have ranked high. But the way that I have per se done stuff is, when I look at my previous rankings and I go into my next week, if a team loses and, like a Florida State, for example, where they drop out, everyone that's below them is moving up. So in the sense of, for me, with Iowa State being ranked so high, they made their climb because everyone, not to say it's just because people above them were losing, they obviously did get their good wins. But it was just more or less the sense of just was Iowa State really that good of a team? I still think they're a good team, and I think Cincinnati's a good team, and they could very much jump up very quickly. I just for me and the way I'm doing it, I think the other teams above them have just done enough to stay above the Cincinnati right now. I can't, knock off these undefeated teams. I don't want to, punish them basically, and for winning and not losing. While Cincinnati, albeit only has one loss, and they did beat a ranked team, but I really like these undefeated teams over them right now.
That's fair. I guess my philosophy is just because a team ahead of you loses doesn't mean you earn the right to jump up to take their spot. Obviously, teams ahead of you lose, you might slide up more, but I won't be afraid to put a team that's unranked and have them jump you if they got one of those big wins. Obviously, it's not a perfect science, but I see where you're coming from, and I do have to give you major props for ranking ODU. I think they're highly disrespected right now, so there are your flowers. You earned it. ODU, I do like ODU. They're a good team. They were one of the teams that just missed the cut for me, which included Arizona State, Illinois, which they were ranked in my initial poll for this week, and then after thinking about it and doing some adjustments, I took them out. And then Tennessee, Utah, Washington, LSU, and your Green Wave, Tulane. I think any of these teams could be ranked right now. It's just that kind of tight right now in that 18 to 25 slot. These teams are really interchangeable, so it's really taking your pick of the litter. These teams are all really good. At this point in the season, we are down to only 15 undefeated teams left. I'm going to be ranking every undefeated team remaining, and they're all 15 are represented. I think if you're 5-0 at this point in the season, you deserve to be ranked. Obviously, Navy's one of my newcomers. They are at 25. Even though they're undefeated, they're below some one-loss teams. I think they deserve to be ranked. They are my 26th team last week. Obviously, some teams jumped in ahead of them. My top 5 stayed the same. I did have A&M jump from 11 to 6. Their win against Mississippi State, their full body of work, I think, is more deserving of the 6th spot, but I do think Ole Miss might have the edge on them. It was a really tough one. I went back and forth with that. UVA jumps up into the top 10, which, crazy to think that the Cavaliers are top 10 in my book, who I don't think anyone would have put money on that, any of our friends. I would have had them ranked this high. But the 3 that I really want to focus in on my rankings here is Michigan, Nebraska, and Cincy. And this really comes down to what I talked about last week. I made it a big emphasis that I was going to have it UVA, FSU, Bama, Georgia, in that order because of the head-to-head wins. Not transitional UVA, just matter of fact of the head-to-head wins. I really value those, and if you have a similar resume, if both of you are sitting at 4-1, 5-1, whatever it might be, if you have the head-to-head win over the other team, I have to rank you ahead of them. I had to rank Cincinnati this week. I just couldn't not rank them after a huge win against a top 10 team that I had top 10 in Iowa State. But that led me to the problem of, Michigan and Nebraska are not ranked in my book. Nebraska beat Cincinnati week 1, and I know you might be saying, Hunter, it was week 1, move on. That game, it's a completely different season. And I think that's bullshit, quite frankly. That game just matters just as much then as it does now. Nebraska deserves to be rewarded for that. And then so does Michigan, unfortunately, for beating Nebraska. These are, that's why I have these 3 grouped together. Nebraska and Michigan took the spots of Arizona State and Illinois for me because of the fact that they are rewarded for their head-to-head wins against each other in Cincinnati, because Cincinnati, I think, is a top 25 team, and they have a similar resume. They beat a top 25 team, Nebraska that is, which means they should be in that spot, and then Michigan beat a top 25 team in Nebraska. So they get added. It was a very tough decision. I went back and forth, but ultimately I felt like I had to stick to my guns and stick with the head-to-head rankings. Obviously, as we get more and more into the season, that's going to cause more and more problems for myself. You might see me lessen that stance, but in this scenario, I still felt good about holding strong on that.
The only gripe I have with the whole, week one sort of stuff is I'm with you in the sense of like every game matters just as much. You can sit there and argue with someone saying like, oh, well, week one teams haven't figured it out. I don't care. Week one is week one. You have to show up and you have to play.
Yep.
The only thing I have against it is that game was at a neutral field, not even really neutral. It was a Nebraska home game, which was insane because it was supposed to be Cincinnati home game. So it made no sense in my book about that. But I can see where you could possibly run into trouble here come down the stretch of the season where a lot of these top 25s are going to be playing each other. I mean, we have one this week on Friday with USF playing North Texas. My 17 playing my 18, your 16 playing your 23. So we're going to run into small stuff like that throughout the rest of the season that is going to drastically change things. And then, once we progress further, that's when you'll probably see more of those 2-loss teams start to cheat in a little bit just because that's just how it's going to go. I mean, there could be a very good team that's a 2-loss. I mean, if Florida State wins out, they're a good 2-loss team in my book. So it's gonna be tough towards the end of the season, but we just go week by week, and we're gonna have to see how it pans out.
I agree. It's further we get into the season, the crazier it's gonna be. The last team I really want to touch on here is Louisville. Obviously, most people don't have them ranked. I had them at number 10 last week. I might be crazy, but I couldn't drop them out of my rankings for the sole fact that they lost to UVA, who is my 14. So I still have them ranked. I still think Louisville is a great team like we talked about earlier. And then overall, I really just want to mention that I think the Big 12 is looking really deep this year. You have BYU and Texas Tech sitting at 5-0, and then Arizona State, Cincy, Iowa State, Arizona, Houston, TCU, and Utah all at 4-1. And I'm trying to find ways to rank all of these teams, and in my head I still feel like I'm shortlisting these teams that deserve to be in the top 25. They are all really great teams at these one-loss Big 12 teams. This next couple weeks are really going to shake things out, but I think the Big 12 is deep, just like I think the ACC is as well. I think they deserve the respect that comes with having a lot of great teams in a conference and not being mitigated because of it.
Absolutely. I mean, we all know that the SEC and the Big Ten are at an advantage purely because of their names. So we try to give, we try to basically take that out of the factor here of what conference you play for and just go off of your resume, what you do on the field. So I do want to hit on your Louisville take there, and I'm going to say that you're keeping them a little high to make your JMU loss look a little better, but nonetheless, they are a good team. I do like where your head's at with them. I've
had them ranked since the preseason.
That's fine. I said it last week. If they, I was waiting for that win from them, and this was their chance, and they didn't get it, so they just didn't get in there for me. But they're still on my radar for sure, but. I
did say as much as high as I am on Louisville. If you remember last week, go back and watch the episode if you didn't. I did predict UVA to get the win on the road against Louisville. So it shows how high I am on both of these teams, quite frankly.
Yeah, there's a lot to watch out for. We could say that every week, but I mean, with every week there's new games, and new games is new result, and new result is new rankings for us. So it's very hard. Like I was saying earlier, this is the first week where I've had people stay in the same spot. So I had some people that just didn't move at all. So it'll be interesting to see it the rest of this week. But we're just gonna jump right into the AP poll versus our collective Dynasty Dummies group rankings here. So go ahead and start us off here.
Of course, keep in mind the Dynasty Dummies poll is an AP style ballot between us two and three of our close friends. So shout out to them for getting those ballots in barely on time before we recorded this episode. But, kicking off with some things about the AP on who dropped out, Texas and Penn State finally fall out, and they're replaced by Memphis and USF, which to me was a huge surprise with the AP putting in not only one, but two group of 5 teams, which I think are both very deserving. So I did love to see that. And then they had a ton of teams receiving votes. Cincinnati had 129, and I'm reading this off of our outline, and it actually got me aggravated again. That Texas still is receiving 111 votes, and Penn State's receiving 97. It blows my mind. Utah, Nebraska, USC, UNLV, North Texas, TCU, Washington, Mississippi State, Navy, Louisville, and Auburn also all receive votes in the AP ballot. But, before we really dive into this, I really just want to say how crazy it is to me that, they have Notre Dame sitting here at 16 as a 2-loss team. I have been on record saying I think Notre Dame's a great team. They'll be back in the top 25 for myself come season's end. But at this point in the season, I don't think any 2-loss team should be ranked. And the fact that Texas and Penn State are still just on the outside, they're essentially a win away from being back in the rankings. Their resumes are terrible. They have no Power 4 wins. The group of 5 teams that they have played are not great. They have not looked good. Penn State, the best thing that you can say about Texas and Penn State is that they played Ohio State and Oregon close. And if the best thing on your resume is a close loss, then I don't think you have a very good resume. They are solely thriving based off of their brand right now, and it infuriates me.
I'm with you there. It's absurd to see that they're right there, basically, where it's like you said, one win, they're back in at this point, and it's just insane to me. Like you said, zero P4 wins, and even the wins that they do have, not that impressive, realistically. I mean, you could say Penn State's more because they won by more in their games, and Texas has not looked good at all this entire season. But even then, to me, not even close to enough. They would have to win the conference to even be considered for me to do anything. And I had said earlier, they could win the Natty, and I might not even rank them. So it just goes to show what a fall from grace they have. But I'm with you there in that sense of it just blows my mind what some of these voters see.
Exactly.
And that's the thing is I don't think they are seeing it. I really don't think that some of these voters, look at, anything.
They look at the badge on the jersey, not the plays on the field.
You can even say they don't even look at that half the time. They just look at the name and go, oh, yeah, they're a good team. Sure,
and
I'll throw them in there.
Some voters still have Texas at 13, Penn State 16. And I think you mentioned this earlier. I think it really goes to show how dumb preseason polls are. I really don't think we should even start ranking teams until this week. This is when the first poll should come out, because then you get an idea of how good these teams actually are. Preseason polls are solely based off of your own personal ideas. You have nothing to base it off of except for, oh, I like them. Which we're at fault for that too, obviously, if we have preseason polls. But it is so infuriating to see this sort of thing continue to happen year in and year out.
It's one of those things that's never going to go away, especially the whole preseason thing, because you got to have a talking point. When that first preseason poll comes out, everybody's talking about it. Everyone's like, oh, why is this team here and why is this team here? And like I said, you're going based off of your opinions and basically a piece of paper. You look at the roster and you go, yeah, they look good. They're one. Texas was purely riding off the coattail of having a Manning on their team. You could argue that maybe some of their defensive players, yeah, sure, whatever. But like Penn State was riding off the fact that they had a bunch of people return, but even then they have looked like absolute garbage. So like the preseason polls are horrendous. I'm with you in the sense that like the first like official poll shouldn't come out until I could probably say like maybe week 4. You could probably get away with doing one. I'd be okay with one at this point as well. And there's a reason why the playoff doesn't come out till halfway through the season. Like,
exactly.
Because they need to sit there, they need the data, they need to look at it. It's like, that's basically saying, like, let's just do the playoff from week 1 and just go with that instead. Like, no, that's ridiculous. Like, you're basing it off of nothing. You're going off of what you're seeing on a piece of paper and not on the field. And that's why we just go off of that the results matter, what happens on the field. We're not going with these hypotheticals because that's what the preseason is. It's just a huge hypothetical.
Too many of these voters are scared to change their thoughts. They have Penn State, Texas ranked so high at the start of the year, so therefore they have to be good because we had them ranked that high. When in reality is you can't be scared to drop these teams and punish them for not performing. Just because you had them ranked 1 at one point doesn't mean they are a top 10, top 20, top 25 team forever. If they keep performing bad, you can't just keep riding the coattails of your earlier rankings. I think that's one thing we do a good job of is we're not afraid to move our rankings around if we feel like changes are necessary. And that kind of leads us into our poll of who dropped out of the Dummies poll. Number 8, Iowa State. Number 12, Penn State. Number 18, Florida State. 24, Maryland. And 25, Houston all fell out this week. They were replaced by 18, UNLV. 19, North Texas. 22, Michigan. 23, Cincinnati. And 24, Navy. And a team that I really want to talk about is Iowa State. They were oh so close to maintaining in our rankings. They actually received a vote from each and every one of us, the 5 of us that add to this. However, they did not get enough points. They finished with 9 points as everyone had them ranked in that 25 to 22 range. And, you might be able to blame me for Louisville still being at 25 because Louisville only showed up on 2 ballots this week. One being mine, where I had them ranked 17th. Another one within that lower 20s. It was enough points. Iowa State had 9 points. Louisville had 10. It was neck and neck. I was really surprised that Iowa State fell off, but that's just how the math ends up working. And, teams that fell out, like Maryland and Houston, I do think that they have a shot to make it back. I'm a little worried about Maryland. That was a very devastating loss, giving up 21 in the fourth quarter after being up 20-0 against Washington. But I think Houston and Maryland still have a shot to crack back into these rankings. And then a couple teams from our end who still receive votes, like we said, Iowa State, and then Nebraska, ODU, and Washington. So again, this week, it feels like every other week, we go from having a tight consensus around the top 25 with a few teams receiving votes, and then the next week, floodgates open and we have 8 different teams receiving votes. So one of the tighter knit rankings for us this week, but really interesting stuff. Our top four didn't change. A&M did jump up to the top 5, but for the most part, things stayed relatively similar. Memphis took a huge jump. But, Tony, what are your thoughts on how the polls really shaped up?
Yeah, I think with ours, it kind of reflects pretty well on how we are as a collective group, and some of the stuff, like you had said, with, you're basically keeping Louisville afloat with how high you have them. I know for a fact that for Iowa State, it was four of us had them at 24, one person had them at 25. So it's very, very close there. And then, it's just crazy that 2 people can have a team ranked like Louisville just because of how high you have them. Just goes to show not really the discrepancy, but like just how, our voting pans out to be because, we do a point system like the AP does. So, but nothing too surprising, honestly, from us. I like seeing, UNLV, North Texas jump in there. I like seeing Memphis move up, being 6-0 and playing phenomenal football right now. So our top 5, you could probably go and argue that our top 7 is probably a damn near lock at this point. Of they can interchange, but it's probably unless someone slips up majorly, those 7 are probably going to be in there at all times. And you could, you might be able to throw in Oklahoma in there, depending on when John Mateer comes back, which I saw a rumor that he could come back this weekend for the Red Rivalry.
Interesting.
So we'll see. But it's one of those things that I think as a collective, we're doing pretty well. We're always going to have our discrepancies about certain teams and
for sure
what goes on. But
5
I
group
think
of
for the
5
most part,
teams in, though. I love that.
Yes, and I know me personally, I put in 5 group of 5s.
Same here.
As I think almost everybody did, honestly.
Not everyone, but it was very close to which teams did or which teams made it. I believe you actually had 6 group of 5 teams in, if I'm not mistaken, because of ODU.
1. Did I miscount? I probably did.
Yeah, you have. I'm looking right now.
I do have 6. Oh yeah,
you
look
have
at
6
me.
So you are Group 5 king right now. I had 5. So definitely a lot of love coming to these top Group of 5 teams, which I think is deserved. They're very good teams at the top of the Group of 5. I will not hear otherwise from anyone.
You cannot discredit these teams purely because they're group of five. I mean, to me, even that whole label of P4 and group of five is ridiculous, honestly. Like, they're conferences. They're all conferences. Obviously, the quote-unquote P4 is going to be better because they have more money injected and they've been there a lot longer, sort of sense, and they have the history behind it. But you can argue that these G5s are catching up. I mean, it's, I saw a great tweet today about how you look at teams like Memphis and Tulane, and it's they pointed out them specifically because they're in the American. USF as well, where it's like, at least with Memphis and Tulane now, it's more or less not a Cinderella story anymore with them. It's almost expected, where you expect those teams, especially those two, because they've been at the top, competition with it as of recent years, especially with the playoff expanding. So, like, and you get these other teams like a USF, and then now an ODU's thrown in there. You can always consider JMU and stuff like that, where it's like it's not a Cinderella anymore, where it's expected, and they expect to do it, and you want them to go out and do it, and they want to do it. They know they can do it. I mean, they know that there's a shot for them because they're being considered. Everyone's going to call it the G5 spot, but it's not. It's the top 5 conference champions, and one of those is going to be a G5. It could very much be 2, depending on how the season pans out. With the way the Big 12 is swinging, and then the way the ACC is swinging on each other, you could see a 2-loss, possibly 3-loss conference champion come out of one of those, and maybe not even get in there.
Exactly. I mean, take a look at last year. The ACC champion ended up being 17 Clemson, which I still thought it was crazy they beat a top team in SMU, and then they didn't actually move up in the rankings. I think that was solely because of how the rankings shaped out. They were a lock anyway, so they kept them at 17. But, you had Boise State was actually the 3rd highest ranked champion ahead of the ACC and Big 12. So, you have a team, you could have a run with a team like Tulane, USF, North Texas, Memphis this year, where they cracked the top 10, and then who's to say an ODU doesn't crack the top 15, and then somehow the Big 10, Big 12, SEC, some champion is much lower, and then you have 2 group of 5 champions in there. There is a pathway for that to happen, albeit I think the College Football Committee is not going to allow that to happen, but I think there are pathways where if you have a team like Boise State last year and then a JMU team from a couple years ago where they went 11-1, those are 2 teams that could have made the playoff, as champions in their own right. So it's very interesting to see the the AAC is super strong this year. So I'm very interested to see the champion from this league, who it's going to be. If the AAC, if the American ends up with a 1-loss champion, I believe that champion deserves to be top 10 because of how good the AAC is. And then, let's say UNLV goes undefeated. I would say they deserve a spot too. Or, maybe it's not UNLV, but let's say ODU wins out. They go into Harrisonburg in a couple weeks, knock off JMU in a really tough environment to win at, and they finish 12-1 as a conference champion with their only loss being by 13 to Indiana. You're telling me they don't deserve a shot? I believe teams should be rewarded for winning. I don't want to hear, ooh, they don't play this schedule, they don't do that. Winning matters.
Absolutely. And, with the way the seating is now, where they have changed it, where it's not, like last year where the top 4 conference champions get the automatic bye and then so on and so forth. Now it's just the seeding, let alone. You could see maybe a little more leeway for, some of these G5 champs. I mean, because my biggest thing with the committee is obviously there's always going to be bias with them, but they don't want to see these small teams. You don't want to. They didn't want to see Boise State host like Ohio State last year, or like they don't want ODU. I know people like us would love it. I think your normal fan would probably love it because it's just a great environment. But like, they don't want to see that because of the money. It's like it doesn't look good for them money wise. So it's like you could see maybe one or two G5s. Definitely one, of course, obviously, but like, seeing two of them sneak in and they both have to go on the road to like an Ole Miss, an Ohio State, an Oregon, or something like that. Like that would invite some very entertaining football. And I think we are more likely to see something like that now because of the seeding and, and of course there's always the talk of expansion now because they want more SEC and Big Ten teams in it, blah, 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 nonsense.
It's frustrating.
We'll talk about that when we get to that point, if we get to that point. But, I'm saying don't write off our G5s. I think they have a better shot this year, especially because we've had, the G5 as a whole has had a lot of solid teams.
I really agree with you. I think this is going to be a really interesting playoff not format, but playoff bracket this year. There's a lot of possibility. I think NIL has really leveled the playing field for a lot of teams, and we're going to see a lot of change happening in the next 5 years of college football. So who's to say a Boise State, a JMU, a Memphis, a team like that, a Tulane for you, can't make it and make a run? I don't want to hear that small teams can't compete. I think last year proved that they can, and I love a Cinderella story. So I'll leave it at that. I think the group of five is going to be just fine.
Absolutely. I mean, the only fear I have of it is the whole poaching thing where, the big schools, they go through their coaching cycles, and, a team like a Tulane where, like JMU happened to you not long ago with Signetti, and then now the big rumor is Tulane's coach John Sumrall that possibly going to an Arkansas or possibly a Tech, because he's got that he can they all know he can win or build a winning program, and you give him the resources that those big P4s have, Lord knows what could happen. But you want to see these teams and these coaches and these players be able to retain them so that it can breed more competitiveness in those G5s. I mean, look at Mekhi Hughes, going to Oregon, and now he's redshirting.
Exactly.
And he had the world at his feet at Tulane, and now he's redshirting, and his season's over, and all because of the money. But I digress. That's his choice. He could have easily been with us and, took the world by storm. Yeah, absolutely, because he played phenomenal. He's played phenomenal the past 2 years, and now he goes this year and he gets 7 snaps, I think, maybe. I can't even remember it.
It's the era we live in now.
Yep, it's just how it goes. But it is what it is. But we got a very exciting weekend of games that are coming up. So we will be covering those in our preview episode later this week. So let us know what you guys think about this. Let us know what you thought about our rankings, the AP rankings, our individual ones, who's too high, who's too low, sort of thing. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Dynasty Dummies. Feel free to follow our personal Twitter accounts at Hunter_Shaw5 and at CronyTony20. And we will see you all later this week for our preview show.
See you guys.